Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the Iron Man 3 IGOR figure from Comicave. This guy is in the 1/12 scale, which means he's going to be generally in scale with your Marvel Legends, and he's made 75% of die-cast. A lot of people really like die-cast, some people don't like it so much. It has its benefits and downsides, and so it's really just a matter of personal choice. It doesn't really add anything to a figure in most cases other than weight. But again, if you like diecast, that's good. And if you don't, then it might not be for you. But from looking at it, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. This guy does look really good, though. Lots of nice paint jobs, various details throughout. And it is a really nicely made figure in terms of the finish. The quality of it is good. Range of motion and articulation, not the best, but it's still pretty good for the most part, and it's really cool looking. So let's get him off the stand and take a closer look. Okay, so you can tell this guy is pretty much hunched over, and you can't really do too much about that. You can pose him some, but he's going to be this way for the most part, so we'll measure him like that. He's about 21 centimeters tall, which is actually to the top of his back, which makes him about a little under 8.5 inches, and of course that will vary as you pose him. And he's very heavy, so he's big and heavy. Like I said, he's made of 75% die-cast, so he weighs, I would say, around 4 pounds, if I had to estimate. And that's very heavy. Most figures weigh less than a pound, so lots of size to him. He doesn't have a ton of accessories, but he does have a few, so let's look at those. The first of which, I guess you could consider, are his hands. He does come with the standard fist hands on him in the package, so you can see those. Pretty basic, not a whole lot going on there, but it's a fist, so what do you expect? So we have those. Let me set him aside without breaking my table. Don't want to drop that guy. And then we have some of these hands, which are just kind of like gripping hands. Nothing really to grip, but they are still nicely done. You can see they did like a translucent plastic over silver for the repulsor on there, so that's really cool. And just a lot of nice detail throughout, which we will address more once we're actually looking at the figure closer. And then these guys, which are really cool, are articulated hands. We have one for each side, but you don't need to see both at the same time. We have a ball joint for each of the main knuckles, so for the thumb right here and then all of the fingers, so you can move the whole thing around. And then we have hinge joints where all of the rest of the knuckles would go. So that's very cool, and it looks nice, looks really, really good. And you can see here with this one, it makes a fist, no problem. So the very nicely executed articulation in that regard. So pretty cool. Another feature I want to show you, or at least mention, I'll try to show you, but I don't know how well that's going to work currently, is he has a light-up chest and light-up eyes. So before we get into the rest of the review, let me show you that. So the chest, yeah, I guess you can see that on camera. It lights up really nicely. It does have some detail work in there, kind of like, I assume it's supposed to be there, like it's different plates of glass or whatever it is that he made it out of. You can kind of see some, I guess it would be like etching, I don't know. But it's in there, and so when that lights up, it looks pretty cool. So that's good. And then the eyes. Now, unfortunately, the eyes are not so easy to turn on and off as just reaching on his back and turning them on or off. The back switch is right there, so that's nice and simple. The head switch, on the other hand, you have to do that. You have to take the head off, which is really not a good design. I get why they did that, because we have to be able to swap out batteries and stuff, so that's part of it. So you pull the head off, and then you have to take this top plate off. And if you're lucky, it'll come off without destroying your fingernail, because it's really stiff. But once you get that off, you can see you can replace the batteries in there, and the switch is inside. They do light up fairly nicely. Not quite as good as the chest, but they do light up. But the switch is inside the head, so having to take him completely apart, let's put the head on the right way, to turn the eyes on, kind of a pain in the butt. Not my favorite feature of this guy. While we have him apart, though, I'll show you the articulation for the neck. It's just a ball peg at the bottom and a ball peg at the top. This is just a support piece, so nothing fancy going on there. That's kind of the situation for this guy in most regards to the articulation. It's there, and some of it works really well, but most of it is pretty minimal. So we did the head. Let's look at the shoulders. First of all, the shoulder pads are kind of on this spring-loaded hinge. So they will flop around and move around, and this outer piece is technically separate from the inner piece. You can see that sliding around there, and that's just to accommodate the shoulder articulation. The first bit we have is where it connects to the torso. You can actually pull that out a little bit. It's really stiff. A lot of the stuff on this guy is really stiff, but you can pull that out, and then you can move the arm around on a giant ball peg. And you can see that piece moving around inside there. That's just to hide the articulation. Then we have a hinge on the arm part of the shoulder, not the torso part, but the arm part over here, and that gives you your lateral motion for the shoulder. You can rotate it around at the bicep swivel right there, and of course you can rotate the entire arm around right there. So given the fact that this guy's really bulky, they did a really good job with that shoulder articulation. I'm very pleased with that. Now we have elbow articulation. It's a double jointed elbow, but it doesn't really have that much range. We do get this guy back here, which hides the joint, so once you bend the arm forward, you can move it around and it'll hide the joint however you want, so that's kind of cool, but you cannot get better than 90 degrees. Granted, you probably don't need to on this guy, but it would have been nice. Something to note, the hands are just connected on ball pegs, so we can pop that off to show you. It's a little stiff, so be careful, you don't want to break anything, but just a big ball peg. Let's see if I can pop that on without... Alright, okay, so the other feature for the arms, other than the wrist that can move around pretty well considering, is this piece right here. And this guy folds forward right here if you want to leave it like that. That's kind of cool. And it also slides forward. So, I guess he did that in the movie. I really don't remember Iron Man 3. I haven't watched it a bunch of times, considering I didn't care for it all that much, but that's a feature that's included on the figure. For the torso, this is where we have some problem because it's very limited. The lower torso combined with the upper torso only gives you, I don't know, probably 20 degrees of motion, not a whole lot. We do get some ab crunch, but again, not a whole lot, just a little bit. And then of course we do get some rotation, but it's really stiff and I don't really want to try breaking it because this guy's fairly expensive and I don't own it, so I can't really force it too much. So very, very minimal, almost non-existent torso articulation. Back here, it's loaded with detail. So that's one thing this figure has in spades. No problem at all with the detail. It looks really good just about everywhere. So the sculpt work, fantastic. No problems at all. All of these guys hinge out. Well, almost all of them. The bottom one does, that one does, that one does, if I can do it. This one doesn't. So that's it though. They don't really do anything. You can see when he moves that it kind of collapses on itself a little bit, but that's it. It doesn't do anything. Lots of detail, though. I can't get over how much detail they packed in there, so that's cool. Then these guys up here, they can lift up a little bit. That's it. They don't do anything either. So, you know, there's a lot of detail going on, and it looks really cool, but don't expect to get a ton of playability out of it. I do want to mention before we go on, the rust and wear effects, the battle damage, if you want to call it that, looks fantastic. So not only is it painted in like for the white parts being worn away, but we do get a lot of rust and things like that, and it's particularly evident on the face. It looks really cool. So, you know, like I said, it's got a really high quality of production, just doesn't have the best range of motion in all regards. So let's move on to the hips. The hips are very much like your standard SH figure arts. You have a hinged ball peg, so you can drop it down and you get the hip motion like that. Or you can push it up and it just looks a little bit cleaner. The hips can move around that ball peg, but there's no thigh swivel beyond that. It's not so bad though, because he's got a decent range right there, and you can bring the legs pretty far forward, pretty far back. So if you wanted to pose him, I don't think you would have too much trouble in the leg department. It's not so bad. And then in the knees. So they don't go straight forward, but that's pretty good because he's supposed to be hunched over a little bit anyway. They go really far back. So that's pretty good. You can get nice range out of that and gives you some posing options. And this groove in this knee right here is so that the knee pad, it's actually kind of hinged. It slides in that groove so it pulls along the knee and kind of folds in on itself as you go. So that's a pretty cool design. Now for the ankles, we have this plate here, which is kind of separate but kind of connected, and we have a ball hinge, or a ball peg, I'm sorry, that lets the foot move around. Now you don't get the best range of motion while it's like that, but you can pull the whole ankle down a little bit and get even more range of motion. So, granted he's not going to be in the most dynamic of poses, you can still move his foot pretty well. He does have a hinge in the toe. That one's stuck on this figure, but this one works, so I can show you that. It has some range. Not a ton, but enough. So that's kind of the story for the articulation on this guy. It's there, it's not a lot, but it's enough, and it's a pretty darn cool figure. So if you are interested in getting an IGOR figure, well, you don't have too many options, first of all, but if you do have options and you're considering this one, I think it might be worth the purchase. It's a pretty cool figure. It's really heavy, has a load of detail on it. Just don't expect to be able to put it in some crazy poses. You're pretty much going to be in your standard hero pose a lot of the time, I'm guessing. But it's still a really, really cool figure. So I do recommend it. I think it's pretty darn good, despite a few shortcomings. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see my upcoming figure reviews, custom figures, and other good stuff. In the meantime, keep collecting.